Okay. Okay, so to get going, I want to suggest that you open up a document on your computer or grab a pen and a piece of paper. Either one is okay. And I'm actually going to turn things over momentarily to my colleague Ian Bickford, who's joining us from Fulbright University, Vietnam. So
Hi,
Ian.
everybody. I know some of you. I'm Ian. I'm the provost at Fulbright University, Vietnam. I'm actually joining from Massachusetts, from Bard College at Simon's Rock, where I was provost until recently. And we're looking forward to hearing from all of you and sharing thoughts about how we're moving our writing-based classroom practices into the remote online space. But because we're in the habit of beginning writing and thinking sessions with private free writing, we'd like to start there. If you are working from a document, I have a suggestion, and this is from the Writing and Thinking Manual for Remote Learning that Erica circulated recently and that I've just posted a link to. I think this is a really wonderful version of the private writing exercise that is available to us in online teaching. I'm going to share my screen just momentarily. So if you, can you see a Word document? If you are working in a Microsoft Word document, I'm going to suggest that you go to your font color and change your font color to white. This makes your own writing invisible to you. We're going to take 3 minutes for private free writing. We will not share what we're writing, but we'll reflect on it and do some process writing afterward. And so for the next 3 minutes, let's just spend some time writing nonstop, writing without stopping, putting some first thoughts onto the page, emptying what we're, wherever we are, wherever our minds are, onto the page, whether with pen and paper or in this document. And if you are choosing to practice this form of invisible writing, at the end of it, we'll change the font back to black or whatever color you choose, and sort of find out what we wrote. Your thoughts will sort of appear in front of you in a way that I think might turn out to be interesting. Okay, so 3 minutes. Rebecca, will you keep time? Let's start.
We will take just 1 more minute. Okay, so that concludes our 3 minutes. If everybody could find a place to stop what they're writing.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Rebecca. And so as usual with private free writing, to begin a session, we won't share these. But if you chose to try the invisible writing exercise, I will suggest that you highlight everything you've just written, go back to the font color and change it to black and see what happens. And I will share just that mine is kind of crazy. Erica, as we were talking about this exercise, pointed out that when she's tried it, that the red squiggly lines under invisible misspelled words are rather haunting. And I think that's kind of an interesting effect, especially for those of us who are not necessarily facile typers. We're going to take a few minutes for some process writing. For the couple of people in the room who are newer to writing and thinking methods, process writing is simply a chance to reflect back metacognitively on something that we've just done and to describe to ourselves what's just happened, to think about simply how it went, what we learned, and then where we are now after the exercise. And so we'd like you to take another 5 minutes to write about what's different in free writing in the online virtual space. To give that a little bit of color, most of us are fairly practiced in asking students to free write in the classroom, sitting around a seminar table. Having just started this session with some free writing yourself, is there anything different about free writing in the online virtual space? And we'll take 5 minutes for that. Again, please write without stopping, and we will share some of these. Okay, are there any questions? Let's start.
Okay, so that concludes our 5 minutes. If everybody could find a place to stop their process, right?
Okay, we're going to take a few minutes to use what we've just written as part of our introductions. We'll take a few minutes to introduce ourselves to each other. There are people in the room who are close colleagues who have worked together for years. There are people in the room who have been hearing each other's names and reading each other's emails for years. And there are people who are entirely new to this group. And so we're all excited to have you here. I'd like you to take just a moment and underline or bracket something that you've written in your process piece that you'd like to share with us about how free writing might be different in the online space. And when you introduce yourself, I'd like you to let us know who you are, where you are, that is what university you're attached to, and your role. And then if you will, simply read aloud what you've underlined or bracketed. And Rebecca, I'm making a guess here that you know more people in the room than that. Of the three of us, you know the most people total. So if you would run through and call on people to introduce themselves in the order that they're appearing on your screen. One of the as teachers moving into Zoom world. I think one of the things that we've all discovered, and I've heard this from many, is that we rely quite a lot on the circular nature of the seminar classroom to go around the room, and that metaphor, going around the room, is harder to accomplish in the linear and randomized rosters on Zoom and faces that are floating in front of us. And so we've been trying to think of different ways to hear every voice and to call on people, especially when asking students to read aloud. So this time through, Rebecca, if we could just go down the list and ask people to share.
Yeah, and I would also just, if I could jump in for 1 second, sorry to interrupt. I would also just remind us that a couple things. Rebecca's going to be taking notes on a whiteboard. And if we could remember to just read what you've written and perhaps only read one sentence, because there's a wonderful plethora of us. There are almost 20 of us. So in order to make sure that we're able to get done what we want to get done in the time we have, we need to be a little bit quicker with our sharing.
Thanks, Erica.
Okay, great. So I've shared a whiteboard screen, and for those of you who have used this function less often, you can do this if you're the host or co-host on Zoom, and you can find it at the bottom of your screen where there's the word share, and then you can actually share a whiteboard and you can write on it. So I'm just gonna go down the list as Ian suggested, and the first name actually is in Russian, and I don't know how to read it. So I'm going to have to ask for some help here. Why don't we start with Agarim, because I can read that name, and then I can try to figure out how to get the Russian name translated. Agarim, do you want to go first? You do have to unmute yourself. Okay, maybe Agarim is not there. Okay, how about Anel?
Hello, everyone. My name is Anel Kulakhmetova. I am teaching Society and Politics at Narhos University in Almaty, Kazakhstan. Thanks a lot for inviting to the session. And I'll read the following sentence. I moved to virtual classroom on March 17, and surprisingly, I'm getting used to this format of teaching. Thank you.
Okay. How about Anna? Thank you very much, Anel. Anna Gurinskaya?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Anna Gurinskaya. I'm from Smolny, St. Petersburg, Russia. And I'm teaching first year seminar this semester. And I'm also teaching a course titled Governing Risk Society, which appeared to be very good course for this particular semester. And the sentence that I would like to read is, I guess if you're an experienced user of writing-based teaching, the process should be fairly smooth, but I don't think it's a good time to start using it if you are new to this practice.
Okay, thank you. I just typed to the person whose name I couldn't read, asking them if they would go next. But if that person, because I can't read it, it's in Russian, but if that person did not get that message, we will go to Courtney next. Courtney, can you hear us? You have to unmute. Okay, we'll move to Denise.
A bit behind because I joined late.
There we go. No.
Now it's me.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
Courtney, yes?
My name is Vera. I am a teacher from Smolny College. I work here at Smolny for many years. I teach the course Writing and Thinking for the first year student, and some courses for third year students, and some special course. I teach Russian literature and some other disciplines. Yes, I have written that we must learn to have a distance teaching. Now I'm ready to hear the speech of our organizer, but I am afraid that it will be difficult for me to understand that my English is not very well. But I'll try to understand and to take part in this workshop webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, Courtney, would you like to go next? I'm trying to unmute you.
I'm sorry, I hope everyone can hear me. My Wi-Fi is terrible.
Awesome.
My name is Courtney Fulalove, and I'm teaching in Abu Dis at the Al-Quds Bard campus. And I think I understood that we were supposed to share only one of our sentences. Mine was that the virtual space more closely resembles how students write their papers and how I write as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Denise, are you there? Dennis, are you there?
Yeah,
No?
can you hear me? Yeah, hi all, I'm Dennis. I work at Smolny College in St. Petersburg, and I teach this spring semester one class. This is elective, cognitive poetics, and I have a small group of experienced students, so we try a lot of practices there. And also this semester I teach as a guest professor at Harrison University, a class in MA on pedagogy. And my sentence from my free writing is about this class. While working with MA students in my class on pedagogy, we decide not to go completely to computer side of the practices and still use paper and pen for free writing while sitting in front of Zoom screens.
Thank you. How about Emily McLaughlin?
Sure. Good morning from New York. I'm at Bard Annandale. I am actually a professor, associate professor of chemistry, so I don't teach much writing rich courses. However, my experience, I'll just share quickly, my experience of free writing has been mostly in workshops alongside my colleagues, like this one. So my sentence is, in this limited experience of virtual free writing, I find it harder to focus on the task at hand, and however, I am more introspective as I sit alone.
Thank you. How about Carrie?
Hi, everyone. Lovely to see you, to see some faces to attach to the email chains. That's really nice, and just see a bunch of new people entirely. I'm at Bard College Berlin. I'm also working closely with Rebecca on the blended learning project for refugee students. My sentence is, what is different about free writing virtually? I've done enough of this that I think I could free write in a spaceship without gravity, but I definitely took advantage of the lack of visual oversight to sneak out for another cup of coffee. So maybe motivation to stick with the whole writing time, and the dilemma of the camera. Everyone should be writing and not looking at the screen, but still it makes things slightly strange or estranged.
Thank you. Thank you. Writing in a spaceship. That's an interesting thought. May.
Hello, everyone. I am May Shaib, and I teach at Al-Quds Bard College, an intensive English 2 course and English Composition 1. And my sentence is, I feel it's different writing on a Word document than on a notebook in class. I feel more motivated and it feels enriching.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ian, you're next.
Hi, everybody. I've already introduced myself, so I will just jump right into my sentence. Whereas I'm very comfortable free writing on the page, I find that writing on the screen is quite burdened for me, as it is where I compose sentences for articles, where I write emails to colleagues, where every inflection I tell myself is of critical strategic importance to the future of the whole university, where every keystroke exacts a toll.
Thank you. Great. Tatiana.
Hi, hello. My name is Tatiana Repina. I'm teaching at St. Petersburg State University. I'm an English teacher. I teach English for academic purposes and critical reading. And now I'm managing doing that online with 4 groups in a row, which is tough, I should say. And the sentence I've chosen to read for you is kind of resonate with what Denise has just mentioned. Students still prefer to write on paper, and I can understand them. The difference in the keyboard, since students have to write in English, not in Russian, fear of typos and other embarrassing mistakes and technical problems, a fear of sharing the screen online averts many of them from actively participating in the activity like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have 3 folks left, I believe. 2 have Russian names. One might be Zhenya, if I can see the picture properly. Could that be possible?
It's me. Yeah. Hi, everybody.
How are you?
Can you hear me? Okay. So usually I teach a lot of writing practices with my students. I use them quite often, but this semester I teach first-year seminar and one elective course, or not elective, but it is for our MA program. It's something on academic writing, and there we write a lot, but usually we work with Google Docs together and share screen, and we try to edit our students' text together. As for FISEM, as Dennis said, I prefer to use paper and pen for writing during my session course. Our students are already very tired of online, of computers, of everything. So I prefer them to write on a paper, and I prefer to use as much talking as it's possible, because they're already very overwhelmed with all this writing and writing assignments, and they're tired.
Thank you. We have 2 people left. One person is labeled as AP-115G. I'm not sure who that is. If that's you, would you be willing to read something and introduce yourself? And the other person is also a name in Russian that I cannot read. So if you have not spoken yet. Maybe you could just unmute yourself and introduce yourself. Whoever is left, we have 2 people, I believe, and you could introduce yourself and read your sentence.
Good evening. I do apologize for some inconvenience. My name is Pavel. I'm from Narcos University. And actually, that is my first Zoom experience. I'm working with my students via Microsoft Teams. As my colleague Anel, I'm also teaching the classes class in social and political science and history. We are using actually the same methods, and my sentence actually is very small that I want to read. That felt extremely awkward.
Thank you. Okay.
So, I'm sorry. Was there one more voice?
We have one more person.
I am Aygerim Sansızbayeva. I am lecturer at New University of Narcos. I teach in social and politics and writing and thinking with Pavel and Anel, and I am very glad that I joined this webinar. Before that, I could not connect the sound, and I want to say that I wrote one moment. Free writing is easier to use than free focused writing, as sometimes students don't connect the camera, and the rational task to make sure everyone has pens and notebooks on hand. If students don't and they begin to improvise, then I feel it. According to the student voice, I begin to distinguish when they read from notebook and they supplement their thoughts during the description. And I understand how many factors can distract from the process, running brothers and sisters and etc. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And Rebecca, thank you for facilitating that. And in writing and thinking, it is important to take our time and get to know each other. And I think that's part of the value of the ethos, and important that we're practicing it here. For me, it is very good to be in this room with an international community of practitioners, and it's great to meet all of you and to see some old friends as well. I'm going to turn the session back to Erica.
Thanks, Ian. And I'll also just share one sentence of what I wrote, which is I really have grown to love the complete awkwardness of silently writing or typing together, which is something that, used to freak me out, and I've grown to love it. So we're going to continue to work in this way. If you look in the chat box, I'm about to share a link. I just shared a link to a Google document, which I'll also share with you on my screen. So what we're going to be doing now is we're all going to work together on a poem. And the way that we're going to be working together on our poem is by first doing some collaborative reading, and then by actually annotating the poem together in a way that might feel kind of chaotic to people, but that's part of the point. Even if this particular process feels uncomfortable for us, we want to be thinking together as a community of faculty about ways to adapt these practices that are central to writing and thinking to an online space. So to begin, everyone should be seeing a poem on the screen, and you should also be able to access it on your Google Docs. What I want to suggest that we do is I would love for a couple of people to read the poem. The poem is short, it's only 3 stanzas. So normally I would ask for volunteers, but given time constraints and the fact that we're a wonderfully large group, I'm just going to ask 3 people to each read 1 stanza. So Carrie, if you're here and you wouldn't mind reading the first stanza, May, if you could read the second stanza, and Zhenya, if you could read the 3rd stanza, that would be fantastic.
Me from myself to banish, had I art, impregnable my fortress unto all heart.
But since myself assault me. How have I peace except by subjugating consciousness?
And since we're mutual monarch, how this be, except by abdication, me of me?
Thank you all so much. I want to suggest that we read the poem a second time, and this time I'm not going to call on people ahead of time. I'm going to trust that everyone will participate. One of the interesting things about teaching online is figuring out how to navigate the list of participants, since you're not necessarily able to go in a certain order like you could in the seminar table. So our constraint is that everyone should be reading one line, and then another person will pick up, and we're still going in the order of the poem.
Okay.
So would somebody like to start? Maybe Dennis, you want to start?
I'll start.
Okay, thanks.
Me from myself to banish.
Had a art.
Except by abdication.
Impregnable my fortress.
Unto all heart.
How
But-
have I peace?
But since myself assault me.
How have I peace?
Except by subjugating
consciousness.
And since we're mutual monarch.
How this be?
Me of me.
Except my abdication.
Of me. Wonderful. Thank you again, all. If we had a bit more time, what I would probably do next would be have us read the poem out of order. So everybody read popcorn style. I might also have people read in other ways. For example, reading to a punctuation mark, reading to a capital letter. I might have us read backwards. So, you can read out loud in any number of ways online in the same way that we might be reading on screen or in person. So our next step will be to collectively annotate the poem. There are about 20 of us, but we're all going to be working in the same document. And I'm going to give us about 10 minutes, probably a bit less actually, about 5 minutes to go through the poem and just mark it up, annotate it in the way that you would normally annotate as a reader. So you might use the highlight tool. If you can see my screen, you can highlight. You can differentiate by writing in different colors. You can also use the comment function. So if you go to insert and then comment, you can add comments. So we're just going to pause and write in the document together. We'll take about 1 more minute on this. And as we're finishing, I would like to invite people to pick one word and quickly just write in response to that word. You can write on the document. You can also write on your own private document. So again, as a way to finish up our reading, pick one word and just write for about 1 minute in response to that word. This might be free association. You might be defining the word. You might be saying something analytical about the text. How you write in response is up to you. What you want to do is just quickly offer a response. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to read the poem. And when we get to a word that you wrote in response to, you're just going to jump in and read what you wrote. So this is a practice that's probably familiar to many people called text or image explosion that students tend to really love. So what we're going to do is we're going to see what it looks like when we do it together virtually. So I'll be the reader in this case, and again, just interrupt and read what you wrote. And if multiple people wrote about the same word, that's fantastic. Just interrupt each other. Everyone with me? Emily Dickinson, poem number 642. Me for myself, to banish.
What does it mean exactly? Actually, the question is more complicated. Who should be banished?
Had I art, impregnable, my fortress.
Impregnable was a puzzling word for me because I don't come across it very often. I had to check the dictionary to find out the meaning. Unable to be captured is very appropriate for the fortress.
Impregnable, my fortress, unto all heart. But since myself assault me, how have I peace?
Peace. Are we at war now? We don't hear the missiles blowing, not even the emergency cars. Only media bombarding us with bad news. How can I gain peace of mind?
Great.
Why assault and subjugation for the same self?
How have I peace except by subjugating consciousness? And since we're mutual monarch,
Mutual, what is the nature of this mutuality? Does mutuality require subjugation of consciousness? Where does the me go at the beginning and end of the poem?
and since we're mutual monarch, how can this be? Except by abdication.
Is abdication a failure to fulfill something, or is it more a refusal to do anything?
Is abdication of self or by others?
Me of me.
The poem starts from me and finishes with me, so it's a kind of returning to the new me, and me is a strange word, and I'm surprising how Dickinson actually 200 years ago works with deixis, because often the poets of 20th century do it.
Great. Well, thank you all. I want us to now pause for a moment and take a couple of notes, and you might do this in your own notebook. You can also share any part of this in our chat box to the entire group. And what you want to do is just take any notes that you are thinking about that involves the process of reading in this way together virtually, and also annotating and working through the poem in this way.
Yeah, Eileen, it's Jonathan. Yeah, I happen to have this like the only half hour or 20 minutes.
And again, we'll just take about one more minute here. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And, you know, I purposely have been sharing my screen so you can also get a sense of all the behind the scenes stuff happening. So, you know, like I've been having private chats so you can kind of see Ian, Rebecca, and I working out the process as it's happening, which I think is something that's important and interesting to be able to anticipate and think about as teachers. You know, we had a whole other 45 minutes planned that we're just not going to be able to get to. But I think that it's more valuable for us to have time to talk as a group about A, what we've just done, B, the document that this webinar is about, and C, what we had hoped to do but didn't have time for, and ways that you might translate an activity like what we've been doing into your own teaching contexts. So I want to invite us to just begin by sharing some of your own observations. And these could be process writing that you've shared in the box. Anybody want to start off?
I wonder if, let's see, I'm cold calling on people. Emily, would you be interested in sharing something?
Sure. This is far out of my realm of what I typically teach. So it's very new to me, but as I'm seeing the annotation of the poem and seeing how others are thinking about it and speaking about it, it makes me consider what tools I might have as I teach my advanced chemistry course to do a similar sort of process.
Thank you. I'll call on a couple more people, and then I'll invite others as you're gathering your thoughts to start jumping in. You can raise your real hand or your digital hand, and I'll call on you. Pavel, please go ahead.
It was quite an interesting experience, to be honest, and now I can understand my students who are not willing to participate actively in the conversations, as the worst part of my experience was that I could not see and understand and catch the whole reaction of the whole group. And I could not understand if my thoughts and ideas are dissonating with the group or not. And I'm not sure that such online format is welcoming discussions and some kind of arguing between students. And I do join the question that some of our students, especially in remote areas and from not so very rich families, they don't have computers and they are working from their phones. And such experience with editing the document is quite good, especially to make to give students some relief from the whole stress of the classes, online classes. But now I'm confused how this format could be used via their smartphones.
The last question is a really interesting one, and perhaps we'll have a little time to discuss. Are there any other volunteers to share thoughts? Okay, in the interest of time, I think we'll...
One more person?
Oh, please, yes, yes.
I see that one of our AQB colleagues, Saida, is there.
Oh,
and I'm
fantastic.
wondering if she wants to introduce herself and maybe contribute something. She hasn't introduced herself yet.
Hi, Rebecca. How are you? How are you all? I'm sorry I tuned in a little bit late because of time difference. I think it's really very interesting, and I think what you have just presented, very, very helpful tools for the students. I'm a media studies professor, so but my major is literature, so this was very interesting to me. I still have some thoughts and some concerns on how we can actually keep our students engaged within this process. I mean, I have been trying, we read together, I share screen, I ask everybody to read and reflect, but somehow you still miss one or two students. How can we actually, tackle this issue?
Yeah, thank you, Saida. And I'm going to read, just because we had some colleagues from Fulbright in Vietnam who needed to leave, and I just got a note from one that I'd like to share with regard to the early part of the session. I was impressed by the invisible writing exercise. It was amazing when writing without seeing what was written, and one had to continue writing as told, moving forward without reviewing what one has put on paper or computer screen. This psychological exercise was truly fascinating, and I was wondering what would come next. And so with that in mind, we're going to open to group discussion. Thank you for sharing thoughts from our process writing. At this point, as we're all thinking about pivoting writing and thinking methods into the digital space, we're now open to talking through any of the particular methods, the exercises that are described in the manual that we've circulated, or particular issues, challenges, or concerns that you're encountering in your classrooms that we can help to troubleshoot. And Erica and Rebecca and I are all here as resources if you like, and I think that also you can all serve that role for each other. And so are there specific methods, specific questions, or specific challenges that you'd like to delve into together? And again, you can use your real hand or your virtual hand.
Well, I heard one question that I think is particularly important, and that is, how do we keep students engaged in this process? And that's something that I personally have been thinking a lot about, particularly, as the instructor, when you're sharing your screen and you're kind of managing a chat box, and students have a range of different connectivity issues. How do you keep them, and how do you also make sure that you're aware of what's going on for all of your individual students when you can't necessarily see them? So that's a big question that's on my mind. I see that Courtney has raised her hand.
Thanks. Actually, my concerns are similar. I have students who have bandwidth issues, as do I occasionally. In addition, they often join on their smartphones. It's very rare that anyone has their video turned on. And so I have a sort of a grid of names. And so, I love these exercises. I think that the free writing could work very well, but collaboratively working on a document, I'm worried, is out of the question. I don't have solutions, I have questions.
Yeah, and I would share that I think we're all working within different and various tech constraints, and sometimes various within a single class, with different students having different levels of access. One of the things that I've always appreciated about writing and thinking is that it does tend to accommodate difference, and can be quite forgiving. And so in the remote learning writing rich exercises manual, there are some ideas for asynchronous and synchronous approaches to each of these exercises, or at least to most of them. And in terms of collaboratively working on a document, that can be done asynchronously as well as synchronously, and students can respond to each other in a later, more simple synchronous writing exercise. So not all of this has to happen in real time.
Yeah, and I would say, adding to what Ian is saying, I was also kind of typing in the chat that similar to what he was saying about you can do it asynchronously, but you could also give students, say, 24 or 48 hours so that you could also give them a prompt where they're actually, one of the things they have to do is respond to each other. So they have to put in one comment of their own and then also respond to someone else's. So then it kind of elongates the process and gives them time to look back a couple of times.
I see that Anna has raised her hand.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to share some of my experience with this. I was assigning all the writing, like to write at home, not during the Zoom sessions, because it feels a little bit awkward, both for me and for the students to do it during the online session. So I would, we were doing like writing in the zones exercise, and I made them like actually write in the zones and then upload their documents onto the Blackboard so that everyone like could see what they have written and how it really works for everyone. Also, we were doing different kinds of prompts while working with the texts. And I would like literally write in the assignment that you have to take a timer, you spend 5 minutes writing about this, then you need to spend 10 minutes writing about this, and then you have to do some process writing. And this process writing you have to upload again to the Blackboard. And then we would use Zoom sessions to discuss all that. And actually the way how I'm handling the discussions, I'm using this raise your hand a lot. And I think it gives a little bit more structure compared to when people just jump in, switch on, switch off their microphones. So it really kind of helps to organize the process.
Entirely agree, and this is working out quite well now. Those were really, really important and helpful thoughts. I see that Anel has raised a hand.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, obviously, I'm dealing with a lot of technical issues, and my students are dealing with connectivity issues, and sometimes they cannot hear me, or they say that they're having problems, or I cannot hear them properly. So basically what we do, we write a lot, we use this chat option. But what I also noticed is that they started listening to each other. The days when the connection works, and again, they cannot talk simultaneously all at the same time because of these constraints. So they started listening to each other and they started responding to each other. And I think that's one of the best outcomes of this remote or virtual classroom. And one other thing, they're writing a lot during the class because we have 3-hour classes, and usually they submit a short essay responding to a question at the end. And one of the things that I also noticed, that they stay in this space and they respond to each other comments and they raise questions, and I thought it was also very positive.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think it's worth reflecting that that some of the jargon of remote learning we're inheriting from a very large industry, and most of us work in face-to-face liberal arts context most of the time, and suddenly we're sort of we're trying to learn from those who teach remotely as a profession, and we're trying to learn what tools are available, and we're doing this very quickly. The phrases synchronous and asynchronous learning actually just reflect something that happens really naturally all the time, which is that we see our students in the classroom. That's synchronous, it's real time, it's face-to-face. We give them assignments, they go away and do the assignments. That's asynchronous. Often they're working with each other on those assignments, either because we've asked them to or because they like it. And so we may be layering our teaching in some of the online industry jargon like synchronous and asynchronous learning, when in fact, what students are doing in these online spaces is a reflection of habits that they already have, and we're simply we have more of a window into those habits because the online space leaves a trace in a way that that the conversations that happen on campus may not in the same form.
And to jump in, I'm looking through the chat box and I'm taking notes on this whiteboard in an attempt to pull forward questions and answers that I'm both hearing and seeing popping up. One of the things that we likely won't really have time to get to that Ian, Rebecca, and I had planned to do was to use the breakout group function, which can be really helpful as far as student engagement, and actually using the breakout function in order to put all of you into smaller groups. And we're going to have you write questions that you could ask students about this poem in order to get them to read and understand the poem or analyze the poem, and also take advantage of what it means to do this kind of work virtually, because there are advantages. You know, there are things that students are able to do when they're working online that just don't happen as easily in person. You know, I've been having my students doing a lot of presentations and co-creating Google Slides. I'm teaching FISEM, so it's a way for the students to be generating the context around the books that we're reading and kind of shaping the questions that we ask of the text.
Also, there was another comment here about, I think it was from May, about the chat function not working during the breakout sessions. The moderator can, or the host can actually send messages to all of the groups. Or alternately, if you've used these breakout rooms, you can pop in and out and remind students of different prompts.
Yeah,
So
I joined your session, but
yeah.
it's just easier through chat.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
But you can kind of pop in and out just to let everyone know and send messages to all of the groups at once.
Thank you.
In sort of laying out what our ambitious plan was for the day and wanting to save some time for discussion like this, we had two additional exercises we were going to try. One was a believing and doubting exercise that asks ourselves in what ways writing and thinking methods are already set up, are transferable to remote learning, and in what ways writing and thinking practices as we are used to them present barriers to online learning. And I'm already hearing some ideas and responses to both of those positions. And then we were going to go into small groups, and if anybody is interested in seeing how to do that, perhaps we can find opportunities to circle back. And we were going to ask small groups to think about collaborative learning questions or loop writing questions that you would consider posing in relation to the Emily Dickinson poem that might be different in the online space than they would be in the classroom space. And so we were going to start thinking about how to create prompts that are responsive to and make use of both the tech landscape of the online space and also the difference in affective relationship between people in the room. You know, we're together but not together. We can see each other but can't see each other. And we feel that collaborative learning question writing and asking is really quite sensitive in nature and nuanced, and often relies on people being in the room together and seeing how each other are responding. And so I'm interested to know if anybody has had experience with writing prompts in the virtual classroom, and if you have learned anything about what has worked and what has not worked, and if the kinds of questions you're asking students in the virtual classroom are changing. And perhaps not, and we can also let that question float. I've found some interesting differences in my own practice, but I'm curious to hear from others at any point.
I also wonder if there are any questions that are specific to the writing rich ideas for teaching at a distance. I know that I think almost all of the people on this call, on this Zoom, have had some experience with IWT practices. So I'm just wondering if there are more specific questions that we could get to. I'm also wondering if folks would like to actually experience the breakout room groups in our last 15 minutes. So this is a moment where I'm asking you all for input. So, you know, the questions on the table is A, are there anything specific to the writing rich ideas for teaching at a distance that people want to discuss? Or do we want to do one more experiential activity? And perhaps, okay, so I'm seeing one vote for one more experiential activity. How about all those who want experiential, raise your hand. Okay, so we're gonna do some believing and doubting in these small groups, and I'm adapting things. Those of you who have taken workshops with me kind of know that this is a tendency that I have that I think speaks to the reality of teaching, which is that I have a tendency to say, at the risk of too much information, exactly what I'm doing as I'm doing it. So I'm trying to essentially compress a 30-minute activity that Rebecca, Ian, and I planned into something that could take 15 minutes, where 10 minutes of that will be in groups and then 5 minutes is wrapping up together. So what we're going to do is we're going to get into groups of 3. And I would like to suggest that each group should do the following. And Rebecca and Ian, you should feel free to jump in and clarify me. So the first thing that I want to suggest that you do is come up with one question or activity that you collectively, regardless of what you teach, might ask students to do virtually in the virtual classroom that involves analysis. So one idea or activity or prompt or question that you might get students to do that involves analysis and also involves writing. Does that make sense? And then as you're kind of coming up with that, I think that one thing that you'll be doing inherently is believing and doubting the idea that one should be doing writing-based teaching online in this way. And Rebecca is wonderfully taking notes in the chat box of what I'm saying. So again, and Ian, you had a wonderful way of phrasing the believing and doubting component of this. Would you mind saying that?
Yeah. And so if in discussion you can kind of visit these two positions. One, writing and thinking practices are already set up for remote learning and transferable to the online space. 2, writing and thinking practices present real barriers to remote learning and the online space. Practices are set up for this. The practices present barriers to this.
Yeah. So again, the goal is to come up with one thing that you might ask or do and that has gone through a very quick believing and doubting process. So I'm going to put you into small groups now.
They're from that range. And so when thinking about analysis, and I think about maybe specifically in my advanced class, having students look at a scientific publication, right? And reading the text and actually thinking about what to do with that. So that's where I'm going in with this activity, but
First, we are jumping. Oh no, Erica just joined us. So I find that works really well. One of the doubts I think I have about that, in order to kind of do the whole activity that we were assigned, is that sometimes I wonder if when they're writing in a Google Doc, somehow I wonder if they do it as carefully as they do when they're writing on paper. I sometimes feel like, even though, interestingly, the computer is what we tend to be used to writing on, but it's almost like I feel like the students take it less seriously than when they're writing on paper.
As long as there are only 4 of us, I'm just gonna on your last thought, which was one of the ways I try to get them to think of it as more durable as a format, writing on the computer, that is by doing a course blog. I mean, it was password protected, but still to have us producing something as a group. But to be honest, it's only half working. So it's a work in progress.
I think that we should all be back as one happy crew. So what I want to suggest we do with our last couple of minutes is hear back from the different groups and get a sense of what you talked about, what new ideas you came out of your group with. Admittedly, 7 minutes is like no time to really get much done. But based on floating around from group to group, it seems like there are some really exciting conversations happening. So I think that it would be useful to hear snippets of those. So Rebecca, I wonder if you want to begin with a recap of what's going on with your group.
Well, we just, and am I unmuted? Yes, I am. We were just, as we were kind of wrapping up, we were having this conversation about how many of our students, because of their age, they're so used to writing online, but they're used to writing Facebook updates, or they don't use Facebook anymore. That's so passé. Instagram, Snapchat, it's ephemeral is the word that Courtney actually used. And I think that was actually really well put. So this question of how to turn their online writing and idea generation into something that is more durable and something that they're taking seriously, and not something that's just going to disappear with a Snapchat. So that was kind of a question that we were sort of raising.
Yeah, that's a really great, important question, is how do you make the writing that students are doing meaningful and not ephemeral? Great. Emily, does your group want to share?
Sure. I was actually just sending a note because I am needed in another meeting at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
So I don't know if Anel or Pavel, you could summarize for us.
Sure. Sorry. Sorry, it took a minute. So basically, we talked a bit about our very different experience, and I think Emily is facing a real challenge, considering she's teaching a chemistry and science course while we're still doing humanities and social sciences. So we talked a bit about dividing students into small groups. We talked a bit about how to keep the students more engaged, because what Pavel had experienced is some of the students who were very active in real classroom somehow started disappearing in the virtual classroom. So I think these are all challenges that we're quite facing, but I mean, in the context of the classes that are scientific, it was switching from this experimental classroom to something, that involves more writing and reading. Yeah, so that's my very short summary. Sorry.
Great, thank you. So I know that we have 2 more groups and we're almost out of time. So Ian and Dennis, are those, am I right, in representatives from the two remaining groups?
Yeah.
If you could both just very quickly sum up, and then we'll say farewell.
I wondered if Anna could synthesize what we talked about.
So our group had two ideas. The first one is to use Google Docs, and the second one to use mind maps. Tatiana proposed it, and I was very curious, so it's interesting. The second thought is that the fragment of the text should be short, match the screen, no more. And believing is that we can use online tools for analyzing text, and doubts, how can we get all students engaged, and how students can be engaged if they, for example, if they have connection from the iPhone or just some small screen device. That's all.
Great, thank you. And Anna?
So we were discussing that maybe for us instructors who are experienced in the method, it may be less challenging, but for the students who are less familiar with using those practices in the classroom, this can be difficult. And we have agreed that by the end of the semester, we will be like a good pool of experts who are actually dealing with those methods, and we will be able to share our experience. And as for the specific exercises, we were discussing how, let's say in Google Docs, you can ask students to make hyperlink to the texts, like hyperlink the texts, and add some images or some connections to whatever like comes to their mind. Maybe it can be music, songs, whatever. And then other students could be writing responses to these hyperlinks. And also we were discussing how we are using different kinds of visual images to supplement the writing activities.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So these are so many fantastic ideas. I will save the whiteboards and the transcripts of our chats, and I'll write them up. I think everybody knows that we have a network support page that's full of wonderful teaching resources from all of your campuses. And I would invite any and all of you to email me directly things that you've been doing that have worked really well. One caveat is that it's very helpful to get the specific steps of the whole lesson, because you want to keep in mind that the people who are reading these are people who might want to do them themselves, so they need enough information about the steps of how the lesson works. But I want to be mindful of time and to say thank you to my co-hosts, Ian Bickford and Rebecca Granado. And let's all be in touch. It's really wonderful to see people from so many different places and to get the chance to write together, even if it is mediated through a screen, so to speak.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
everybody, for being such willing
Thanks,
participants.
Rebecca.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. See you guys.